Hey guys, OGalbina here, bringing you guys our next Draft League typing tier list. Today, we're going to be talking about the fairy type. There's not a lot of fairy types in the Paldea deck, even post-home, so it's going to be a very, very short video, but it's a very important type nonetheless. If you guys do enjoy today's tier list video, be sure to drop a like on this video, as well as sub to the channel. We're on our way to 3,000. We just hit 2,400. I'd really appreciate if you help me out along that goal. It helps me out a ton, and if you want to become a member, there's a little join button down there. Plenty of awesome perks, whether it be emotes, special on the Discord, or even Draft League help and special member only videos. So yeah, with that being said, we can go ahead and jump on into it. Now, like I said, there's not really a lot of fairies in the Paldea decks. It's a very, very limited typing, but it's incredibly important in the draft format. A lot of key resistances, especially to moves like fighting, is obviously incredible, but that dragon immunity in particular is really, really nice and important to have. Really, if you don't have a fairy, dragons are going to give you a really tough time, so it's important to at least have some kind of immunity to it, and there's at least one for every coach if you're doing a 16-man league most of the time. You might have a pretty terrible fairy, but you'll have one nonetheless. I have all the Pokemon that I think are somewhat draftable in Paldea decks right now. Now, I might be missing one because I always do when I make these tier lists, so if I am, sorry, but yeah, that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump on into number one, which is going to be Big Wigglytuff, and unfortunately, we are starting off on a bad foot. This is immediately going to go down into D tier. Now, I may move it to C tier, and it's honestly at the top of D tier for me personally. Because of that normal typing, it actually has a very specific niche that I like a lot, that only, I think, one other fairy on this list really can boast, and it's really being able to check Dragapult incredibly well. Being immune to both of its stab combinations is really nice. For a low tier Pokemon, getting almost a hard counter to arguably the best Pokemon in the Draft League format is pretty incredible. Now, the benefits kind of end there. It has a great move pool and a solid HP stack and past good wishes, but it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, to be completely honest, when you're a fairy. And it is definitely not the strongest thing in the world. Pretty exploitable as well, offensively and defensively. And can give yourself, you can put yourself in a tough position a lot of times with Wigglytuff, but nonetheless, not the worst Pokemon in the world by any means. Next up, we have Azu, and again, we're just two scales. I personally think Azu is an S tier fairy in this format. Well, I move this down a little bit. I personally think Azu is an S tier fairy in this format. If you look at every single top tier Pokemon in Paldea decks right now, at least pre-home, it checks it in some way, shape, and form. Priority is incredibly strong in a Terra meta where like everything can set up and change their typing and things like that. Having a strong Aqua Jet is incredibly viable. Choice Band sets are obviously still great, and Belly Drum sets are still pretty solid, but I especially love Assault Vest variants. I love Rest Talk variants with like Helmet or Leftovers, or even Boots. Encore is a great tool that it has access to. It can't Perish Trap like it could before, but personally, I think Azu is like, it's my favorite fairy in the format defensively to use, and still very good offensively. I really like it for its anti-meta potential. I've yelled about it a million times this gen before already, but I'm personally going to put it up there in S tier. Then we have Gardevoir. Gardevoir's going to go right here in B tier. It has some niche defensive application, good Spadef stat, Wish, all that good stuff that fairies typically have. I think it's a little bit more on the frail side. That's why I don't personally love Guard a lot, but offensively, it is hard to deny how good Gardevoir can be. With a Scarf or a Specs or even a Life Orb, I've seen Assault Vest do really well as well. Solid coverage, has a way to hit bulky steals, obviously, which is really good. Focus Blast, things of the sort. Again, the biggest issue for me is Guard's bulk. Also, Trace is a really phenomenal ability. Guard is great anti-weather as well. Typically, like Scarf Guard is always going to outspeed whatever weather abuser your opponent has, which is obviously really good. And just Trace for other reasons, whether it be taking Regen or taking Intim or things like that, can always be very beneficial in my mind. So, yeah, I'm going to put Guard in B tier here. Next up, we have Florges. I think Florges is top of C for me. Again, I think it's very good defensively, very good on the Spadef side. It can Wish or it can Synth. It can Calm Mind. I think with Terra, it would be a little bit better if you had the ability to Terra either into like Fire or Ground. It'd be pretty solid. My issue with Florges is it's like really abysmal coverage. Like it's really abysmal coverage. It doesn't really hit much. It really gets stuffed by steals. It does get access to like Psychic for poisons and things like that, which is just fairy, but those steals and those fires really do exploit you pretty heavily. And the weak physical defense also really holds it back from being as bulky as you want it to be. Like I know for a fact, like Terra Dark Choice Band Crunch from Wrong Moon just raw 2 KOs Fizz Death. like just outright, which is crazy. I understand it's Choice Band, Terra Dark, whatever, but that 2-hit KOs floor just raw. So I don't know, I'm a bit iffy on it. I think it's pretty solid though, and it's definitely a fairy that I would draft, but not my favorite on the list, if that makes sense. Okay, next up we have Dedenne. I'm gonna go ahead and put Dedenne here in D tier. I'm gonna be honest, it's just not a very good Pokemon. Very weak, very frail. Electric Fairy is an incredible typing as per Tapu Koko in previous generations, but outside of that, it really doesn't offer much to your team in ways of being a fairy type. Next up, we have Klefki. I'm going to go ahead and personally put Klefki. Honestly, I'm going to put an A tier for now. Again, I really like the anti-meta potential. I love having a Pokemon that stuffs Chien-Pao very well, unless it's Terra. I love that aspect of Klefki. I also love the aspect of having Prankster Thunderwave in such an offensive meta, as well as the spikes and the screens and things like that. I actually personally prefer this Pokemon over Grimstar in a draft league setting 10 times over, but we'll talk about that when we get to Grimstar. But I'm definitely a big Klefki supporter. It's probably bottom of A, but I really like Klefki a lot. Next up, we have Carbink. Carbing's going to go down here in C tier. It's actually not the worst Pokemon in the world, and I'm actually contemplating maybe giving it a go in this upcoming generation. It does get, like, body press and spikes and rocks now, which is awesome. The biggest issue with Carbink is its lack of recovery, so you need a way to, like, wish and keep it healthy. But also, how unbelievably... You know what's crazy? This is the morning time when I'm recording. It's 8 a.m. I've been up for 3 hours. It's when I start recording, I start yawning nonstop, and then everybody makes fun of me in the comments because I do that, or I'm snorting because of my allergies or something like that. I'm sorry, guys. I promise. I have no idea what it is. It's when I record, I just yawn like crazy. I try to hold it back. Regardless, the biggest issue with Carbink is that it yawns a lot, but it also is very passive. It's not the strongest Pokemon in the world, and I feel like it's very exploitable. But with screens, boom to kind of get pseudo momentum. Dual hazards, body press is a great tool for this gen. I think that's really good that it ended up getting that, but overall a bit mediocre. Next up, we have Diancie. Diancie's actually gonna go here, the top of B tier. I love Diancie. I loved it in previous generations. The Rock Fairy typing, like Carbink, is great, but it's much less passive. You can rock out with even like Sneaky Trick Room or Rock Polish sets, which is really cool, or Weakness Policy variants. Offensive Diancies are very solid, but defensively, it's obviously incredible. And this generation, Diancie got access to spikes, which is so unbelievably awesome for this Pokemon. You have no idea. The fact that this thing can set up 3 layers of spikes now is going to be really clutch and wearing down, opposing checks, as well as just the opposing team in general. I believe it also gets Baton Pass for momentum in a draft league setting. So I really like this thing as a low tier fairy option to draft and pick it up for your draft league team. I definitely think you should give it a go if you can. Next up, we have Sylveon. Sylveon's going to go here in A tier for me. Again, really solid. I think pre-home, it is the second best fairy type defensively, by far. I think Sylveon really misses that Mystical Fire coverage that it had before. Did it lose Mystical Fire? I actually don't know if it lost Mystical Fire. I feel like it did. Hold on. Let me check something. I'm actually super curious if it lost Mystical Fire. Pokemon Showdown. Let's see. Sylveon. Mystical. It did. Okay. I'm not an absolute idiot. So it did lose Mystical Fire, which I think is a pretty big nerf to it now. It's really stuffed by those steals again. But again, it's a great Wish Passer. Calm Mind can be great. Specs can be great. I've even seen Cursed Sylveon's work in the past. I don't think it gets that move anymore, but Pixelate's obviously a great ability. It can yawn things. It can set up screens. It can Baton Pass. Overall, a very versatile one. Okay, next up, we got Mimikyu. Mimikyu's going to the bottom of C. I would personally put it in D tier. I think objectively it goes in C. I really hate this Pokemon, man. I think he sucks. I understand the aspect of it of like having that like guaranteed like hit taking capability with your disguise is a really cool aspect. I just think this Pokemon is so unbelievably weak. Unless you have a Life Orb, you're not really picking up those Okos or 2-hit KOs that you need, a +2, and even then, you're not bulky, you're not fast. Your priority is, resisted by a lot that you're trying to hit and take on, and even then, +2 Shadow Sneaks are so unbelievably weak. I think this Pokemon really felt like it was designed with Z moves in mind, because in Gen 8 and Gen 9, I have not been a big fan of Mimikyu. Plus the fact that your disguise being broken now takes off that little tick of your health, so you can't be like Focus Sash disguise sets, like 2 SDs or whatever it might be. It's pretty tough. I actually think Mimikyu is best used in like a weird utility role type of way with like Destiny Bond, T-Wave, Curse, things like that. It's just like an annoying nuisance with that disguise, because I think offensively it's just so underwhelming. I really don't like the Pokemon at all personally, so I don't know. That's just me though. Next up, we have Morgrem and Grimstar. I'm gonna put Morgrem at the bottom of D tier just because it does what Grimstar does, but worse. So I'm gonna talk about Grimstar, but keep in mind Morgrem does the same thing, just not as good because it's a Morgrem. But Grimstar, big buff this gen. Obviously, getting Parting Shot to its move pool, and then having access to dual screens makes this thing probably the best pure screen setter in the game. I also think that Grimstar is really good offensively, and people really sleep on that aspect of it. They think of it as like the T-waving dual screen Parting Shot mod now. But bulk up like Resto Chesto or Restock variants can be absolutely demonic. I've used Assault Vest Grimstar before, even with like Frisk. I've used Choice Band Grimstar and things like that. And it really can beat down a lot of scary threats on the opposing team. It's just, I don't know. I'm not the biggest screens guy in the world, so maybe that kind of dampens my opinion on it just a bit. It's not the best bulky fairy in the world. It's very good offensively, and I think it's good as a dark type. It's just not good as a fairy type, if that makes any sense. It's also a really good Pult check, though, so I guess that's true. Unless it's like a Terrifier Pult, Grimstar can check it pretty darn well. So, yeah. Next up is Hattering, and Hattering has seen a huge spike in usage this generation. I'm personally still going to put it in B tier. I'm not the biggest Hattering guy in the world, but it is very solid nonetheless. Again, can be absolutely a nuisance. No, I think bottom A is fine for me. I think Magic Bounce is obviously an incredible ability, bouncing back hazards and status and a bunch of things of the like. It's very bulky. It can be very strong as well with its coverage and dual stabbing and Psychic and Fairy, which is really cool. OTR, like offensive Trick Room sets, can be really threatening to a lot of teams as well. So I think Hattering is actually a really solid fairy, and I think this gen is shining a lot more because there's not as many fairies in this early Paldea Dex format, even in post-home. Speaking of post-home, we have our second S tier fairy in Enamorus. I'm still gonna put Ozzo above it. I don't know. I'm a crack it. Now Ozzo won't be our highest fairy, but it's going to be higher than Enamorus. I think Enamorus is going to be really cool, though. I think, like, Terra Fighting sets can be really cool. I think Terra Ground sets can be really cool. This thing has great coverage. It has Contrary plus Superpower, which is obviously really nice. On physical or mixed sets, Superpower plus Play Rough really just hits most things, to be completely honest. So that's a really nice aspect of it. It can also just be like Q-Charm sets with like Calm Mind and Earth Power and Mystic Fire and Sludge Wave or Sludge Bomb and things like that. Moonblast obviously hits really hard. This Pokemon can be really solid. I think with Boots, it's going to be a really big nuisance to a lot of teams. It's a mixed wall breaker or a special wall breaker. And it's going to, really cleave through a lot of squads. So I personally really want to try it. I haven't used it yet, but I've played against it a few times and it's really annoying. Now, speaking of the worst version, we have an Enamorus Starion, which I think if this thing had Roost, it would low-key be an S-tier Pokemon. I think because it doesn't, I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. It's still very bulky, same move pool as the Enamorus, and again, very bulky and obnoxious, but it doesn't really have a way of healing itself other than, like, rest variants and things like that. If you're Resto Chesto, then you're not Boots. Which means you're going to be taking a lot of shit from hazards and things like that and rocks. Now, like, Combine Draining Kiss sets can be pretty cool because I think it's really bulky, and potentially like Terra sets could be really cool, but yeah, not super big on it personally. Next up, we have Douchebun. I'm gonna go ahead and put Douchebun here in C tier. Now, the fire immunity as a fairy is really cool. It's pretty fast. It has Wish. Lots of cool aspects to it, but again, it's really underwhelming stat-wise outside of that defense. Not the bulkiest thing in the world. It is a good check to, like, physically offensive Dragons, Darks, and, Spikes. Jeez, dude, I'm gonna die. I'm so tired. I gotta go to work after this, y'all. But yeah, overall, I think it's just, like, the stats and the move pool that let it down. It can check fires, but, like, at the same time, it doesn't really hit them very well outside of Stomping Tantrum from a very weak Pokemon. So, I don't know, it's interesting. He's a really cute guy, though. I like him, so that counts for something, right? Okay, next up is Screensail. I'm gonna put Screensail at the bottom of A tier. I think this Pokemon is really good if you know how to play with it. Now, if you're not super experienced in draft, I would say this is probably a C tier Pokemon because while it's very bulky, it's very exploitable defensively, or offensively because it is so weak. But it obviously has the move pool to stop those kinds of things like Taunt and Encore and Parasong and things like that. And it can be really good in anti-setup situations or just walling something to the end of the earth. Even if it's just one thing you can specifically set your Screensail to do is going to be wall a specific Pokemon. And that's a really clutch aspect of it. Obviously, Wish is great. I also think that like Booster Energy, Calm Mind, or Bulk Up sets are great. Even Weakness Policy variants, because you can boost up on both sides, and you have great offensive coverage. It's just the fact that they're very weak. Moves coming off, it's a really weak attack. Okay, next up, we have some bangers to end it out. I'm going to do Tinkerton first, because I don't know why it's behind. I'm personally actually going to put Tinkerton in C tier, probably above Florges. I know a lot of people really like Tink. I'm not a big fan of it. I think C tier is about fine for it. Again, that typing is incredible. I think it's the stats that really let me down. They're very middling. The Spadef is good. It can be somewhat bulky, and it's a great rocker. But I expected so much more of this thing, either offensively with that incredible typing, or defensively with just a ton of bulk and being obnoxious, steel, and fairy or something like that. And it kind of just falls in the middle ground of both, and it ends up being a little bit underwhelming in practice, in my opinion. So I'm going to put it in C tier, but it's definitely not a bad Pokemon. I give it a lot more shit than it really does deserve. Okay, next up for last two, we got 2 S tiers to finish it out. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to go ahead and put Flutter in S. I only included this Pokemon because there are some leagues that do allow Fluttermane. You should not allow Fluttermane in your league. Unless this is the first gen of the league and you want to test it and see if it really is broken. We did that, and it was broken. Fun fact. Super, super nuts Pokemon. Incredible speed, Spadef, and special attack, but especially that special attack and speed is the most important thing. It can Calm Mind. With the Booster Energy, it's incredible, whether it be speed or special attack. Its coverage is incredible. It can knock out with choice sets really, really well. Choice specs and Scarf are incredible. Life Orb, I've even seen AV before. This thing, it's just absurdly broken. There's not really much else to talk about other than, like, look at calcs from this thing, look at this thing's move pool, and look at how easily it rips through every single team in this metagame. So, yeah, it's going to go here in S tier, and that's about that. Then lastly, we have Valiant. Valiant's going to go here second in S tier. Definitely the best offensive fairy in the format, provided that Flutter is going to be banned. But Valiant is incredible. With Terra, it just becomes an absolute monster. It has incredible coverage, Sword Stance, and Calm Mind. Booster Energy speed sets are really, really viable, as well as even special attack and, attack. This Pokemon is, like, built for the Draft League format, in my opinion. Like, as that, like, mixed breaker, physical, special, whatever you want it to do, Valiant will be able to do for you offensively. Very frail on the Spadef side, but there are ways to play around it, and I don't want my Valiant taking hits anyway, so I'm okay if it's a little bit frail on one side, but yeah, that's going to be the tier list. Again, a super, super short one. What? 4, 8, 12. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. There's literally just 20 fairies that are draftable, and 2 of those are Morgrem, Dedenne, or Morgrem and Dedenne. So, like, you know, what can you do? But yeah, I think that there's still some really good ones here. It's just make sure you really prioritize getting your fairy in a Paldea next draft right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed, drop a like. If you're new here, drop a sub. And also consider becoming a member down below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.